What happens when there is commitment to self-interest rather than commitment to a cause greater than one's self? There's an example of that kind of decision that needs to be made towards the end of the book of Numbers, Numbers chapter 32. Some of those tribes that have committed atrocities for generations have been subdued on the east of the Jordan River. Moses will not be able to cross the Jordan and go into that promised land, but he is with them while they actually are victorious in acquiring a fairly large area of land east of the Jordan River. But in chapter 32 of Numbers, verse 1, those from the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad, the statements made, had very large herds and flocks. And they see the land that's been conquered on the east of Jordan. And they like what they see. And so in verse number 2, they came to Moses and Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the community and said, verse number 4, the land the Lord subdued before the people of Israel, the lands are sufficient for livestock, and we have livestock. Verse 5, if we have found favor in your eyes, they said, let this land be given to your servants as our possession. Do not make us cross over the Jordan. We do not want to engage in that conquest any further than where we are. And we fought our battles and we're pleased with the outcome, and we don't think we need to actually help anybody else. So in verse number 6 and verse number 7, Moses said to those of Gad and those of the tribe of Reuben, shall your countrymen go to war while you sit here? Why do you discourage the Israelites from going over into the land the Lord has given to them? Interesting question. Well, the interest is here. It's not with the rest of that conquest, so why should we be involved? In the third place, verse number 8 down through verse number 13, Moses says, this is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to look over the land. After they went up to the valley of Eshcol and viewed the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land the Lord had given to them. Verse 11, because they had not followed me wholeheartedly, and not one of the men at 20 years of age or more who came up out of Egypt will see the land, is a statement that God made to that disobedient nation. What Moses says is, your fathers, your parents, wandered around in the wilderness until they died because they didn't believe they could go in and take the land or should be involved in it. And you're basically doing the same thing. The statement is made in verse 14 and 15 that you're really kind of repeating that process. Here you are, standing in the place of your fathers and making the Lord even more angry with Israel than he was before. You haven't learned the lesson. Short-term memory, verses 8 through 13, and then a rebuke, verse 14 and verse 15. You're doing the same thing. And you're justifying it because you're really comfortable with where you are at this particular point in time and with the land before you on this side of the Jordan River. You're not thinking about what transpires for the rest of the tribes of Israel on the other side. There's a statement that's made beginning in verse 16, and it really goes down through verse 27. After Moses makes that statement, and they think about what has transpired in the past and the self-interest position that they are taking, they make the statement in verse 16, we would like to build fortifications for our livestock, cities for our women and our children, and then we'll actually take up arms and fight with the rest of Israel. Verse 18, we will not return to our homes until every Israelite has received his inheritance. We will not receive any inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan, because our inheritance has come to us on the east of the Jordan. And then there's a statement really that talks about the blessing that they will have if they continue to fight with the rest of Israel in verse 20 and 21, and even in verse 22. And then a statement of warning in verse 23. If you fail to do this, if you don't go and help the rest of the Israelites, you'll be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out. They reiterate the statement again to Moses and the leadership of Israel. Verse 26 and 27. Our children and wives, our flocks and herds will remain here in the cities of Gilead. But your servants, every man armed for battle, will cross over to fight before the Lord, just as our Lord says. We will not abandon our countrymen now. Commitment just to self is one thing. Commitment to a greater cause is something else. In fact, the philosopher of the 18th century, Edmund Burke, who was an Irish statesman and philosopher, I'm paraphrasing his quote, but you've heard it before. Evil actually triumphs when good men do nothing. In fact, Albert Einstein made a statement kind of similar to that. He talked about the fact that the dangerous nature of the world is not really necessarily because people are evil, but because people who could do something really don't. It's not a new idea from the 18th or 19th century. In fact, if you go back and read something that you find in the wisdom book of the Hebrews, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 24, verse 10, verse 11, and verse 12. If you falter in times of trouble, how small is your strength? Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those who are staggering toward slaughter. If you say, we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay each person according to what he has done? Now, what's the point? The point is, when I say I really don't want to get involved, I don't want to help anybody that's in this particular situation. I don't want to speak out. What happens when that kind of problem is not knocking on somebody else's door, it's knocking on your own? There's nobody left to help in your time of need. For those of the tribe of Gad and the tribe of Reuben, we're satisfied with what we have already. Don't make us fight with the rest of Israel. Moses points out that type of thinking, that train of thought, was something that caused their parents and grandparents to die in the wilderness. Lack of commitment other than self, lack of concern, lack of belief. We live in an age of doubt in a lot of different areas. We live in an age of complacency, almost on every turn. Perhaps, as has been the case in passages we have viewed together before, this lesson of commitment to a cause greater than self needs to be something that people hear very clearly and very loudly in these troubling days. Interesting chapter. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.